And I want you to hear how he lays these clips out about preparing yourself for the bank crash that is coming. And we're talking about a U.S. bank crash. Now, I know that there's things happening around the world. We've seen Credit Suisse go down too. But look, listen to what he says. And a lot of this is revolved around the FDIC and the meeting they're having inside. He can say it better than I can. Watch this clip.
Now we have our first stunning piece of video from the FDIC and a stunning meeting that they held in November that they don't want you to see. You're going to see members of the FDIC and other panel discussions in this FDIC meeting. It's not just FDIC members. It's lawyers, it's bankers, but they're all around a table admitting that a crash is coming. This is amazing. Watch.
Bank debt today is not what it was before. It is not principal protected by design. And I think that expectation, I like how you started off, Betsy, like it's all about expectation setting. And I think that is absolutely critical. If that doesn't hold, this whole thing doesn't hold.
I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be.
Oh my God, they might panic and they might actually want their own money that they worked 40 years of their lives for. And they're also saying publicly in this meeting, and they all kind of laugh about it, that they don't have any faith in the banks.
I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do.
So we don't have faith in the banking system in here, and they all laugh. They're like, yeah, none of us do. We're the FDIC. Listen, though, to the next guy.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you...
That's Gary Cohn, former National Economic Advisor to the former administration.
Put this out, like, why are they telling me this?
Can't tell the little people what's really going on here. It will just scare them, and their little brains can't handle it.
Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim. We want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in. They're going to get their money out.
It should be accessible when people need to know. But I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
They also admit on camera that they don't want you to know this because only people who need to know that it's coming should be notified, i.e. the wealthy.
So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people who charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them.
You common people shouldn't be told because you would take your money out of the banks and then they wouldn't be able to use your money for bail-in purposes to save the banks. When the collapse comes, the FDIC admits that they will send out an announcement. So get ready for this. They admit they will send out an announcement and they will tell us not to use money. This is how that's going to go down. They tell us that they plan on telling us on a Friday night.
So that if and when we do have to have that announcement on Friday night, ideally Friday night, that people are in a position to receive it, understand it, and say, yeah, that works. And we can see how this will happen. Of course, there will be doubters, but there's a lot of things going on. What we want to hear from you today is what you think the priorities would be in order to go about setting expectations appropriately in public about how we would execute Title II.
They're admitting like this is coming. And they're saying that they managed to pull their money to safety. The rich people will pull their money to safety ahead of time. But most people were totally screwed because they weren't in the know. This is what happened in 2020. They weren't Bill Gates. They didn't get the heads up, the phone call from Nancy Pelosi.
And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out in the general public.
The idea that these people are sitting there waiting for these things to unfold and they're going to see that the rich people will be fine. And he brings up the point throughout the meeting where we've got to try to basically convince these rich people just to keep in the system. It's kind of like the Bernie Madoff story again.
You can tell whether people understand who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected.
Moves because we alerted them. They sold their stocks. They were in the know. They were fine. And you got screwed. Like if you can keep those 4 or 5 big guys in the game, then he can support this house of cards. So if the expectation doesn't hold, then this whole phony house of cards collapses.
And that's what we're talking about here. And I tell you something, I don't show this to be alarming, but the information is alarming to me.